My name is Sarah, and the last time I saw Victoria Hastings, she was destroying my life one Instagram post at a time. I was 17, surviving on one meal a day, wearing the same uniform until it fell apart while she documented my poverty for her entertainment. Fast forward 15 years to our Preston Academy reunion, where she took one look at my designer dress and wedding ring and laughed. "Looks like you married rich." The entire room went silent when her husband Marcus turned to her with confusion written across his face and said the words that changed everything. "Victoria, she's my boss." If you're watching this video right now, I'd love to know where you're from. Drop it in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., but Sarah Mitchell was already awake, lying in the dark and listening to her mother's quiet movements in the kitchen. Through the thin walls of their apartment, she could hear Mrs. Mitchell preparing for another double shift at the hospital, where she cleaned operating rooms and patient wards for $11.50 an hour. Sarah reached over to silence the alarm before it could wake her younger brother, Tommy, who shared the pull-out couch with her in what was generously called a one-bedroom apartment. In the dim light filtering through the water-stained curtains, Sarah could make out the Preston Academy acceptance letter taped to the refrigerator. Her mother had laminated it at the library, treating it like a holy relic. Full academic scholarship, the letter proclaimed, but Sarah had learned that full was a relative term. It covered tuition, yes, but not the mandatory uniforms that cost more than their monthly grocery budget, not the graphing calculators that everyone else received as stocking stuffers, not the senior class trips to Europe that she'd have to decline with carefully crafted excuses. She padded to the bathroom, where her single Preston Academy uniform hung from the shower rod. She'd spent an hour last night scrubbing a stubborn stain from the collar, and now she carefully pressed it with the ancient iron that required a prayer and a precise jiggle of the cord to heat properly. The polyester blend blazer would never look quite right next to the wool ones her classmates wore, but from a distance, if you didn't look too closely, she could almost pass for one of them. "Sarah, honey," her mother whispered, appearing in the doorway already dressed in her hospital scrubs. "You sure you don't want me to drive you? I could be a little late."
Mum, no.
"Your supervisor already warned you about punctuality. I'll take the bus." Mrs. Mitchell's face crumpled slightly, the way it did when the weight of their situation pressed down on her shoulders. She pulled Sarah into a fierce hug that smelled of industrial disinfectant and vanilla body spray from the dollar store. "You show them, baby. You show them all what Sarah Mitchell is made of." 45 minutes and 2 bus transfers later, Sarah stood at the gates of Preston Academy, watching Mercedes and BMWs discharge their precious cargo. She recognized the nervous flutter in her stomach from her first day 3 weeks ago, when she'd made the mistake of thinking these people might give her a chance. "Oh my God, she's back," a voice carried across the manicured lawn. Victoria Hastings stood at the center of her usual circle, her blonde hair catching the morning sun like she'd been professionally lit. "I thought maybe she'd realized her mistake and transferred back to public school where she belongs." Victoria was the kind of beautiful that money amplified, perfect teeth from years of orthodontia, skin that glowed from expensive treatments, and a figure maintained by private Pilates instructors. But it was her eyes that Sarah had learned to fear. Cold, calculating, always scanning for weakness like a predator surveying the savannah. "Victoria, please," one of her followers giggled nervously. "She might hear you." "So?" Victoria's voice pitched louder, ensuring Sarah could hear every word. "I'm doing her a favor. Someone needs to prepare her for the real world, where charity cases don't get to pretend they're equals." Sarah kept walking, her worn backpack, a thrift store find she'd carefully cleaned, bouncing against her spine. She'd learned quickly that responding only made things worse. Victoria fed on reactions like a vampire sustained by humiliation. The morning assembly was already filling up when Sarah entered the auditorium. She moved toward an empty section in the middle, hoping to blend in, but Victoria's voice cut through the chatter. "Excuse me, scholarship girl. That's our row." Sarah looked up to find Victoria and her entourage standing in the aisle. There were dozens of empty seats around them, but that wasn't the point. This was about power, about reminding Sarah of her place in Preston's carefully maintained hierarchy. "There are plenty of other seats," Sarah said quietly, her hands gripping her backpack straps. "Exactly," Victoria smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "So find one. These seats are for students whose parents actually contribute to this school. You know, the ones paying for your free ride." The surrounding students watched with the fascinated horror of witnesses to a car crash. No one intervened. Sarah had learned that Preston operated on unspoken rules, and challenging Victoria Hastings was akin to social suicide. She stood, her face burning, and moved to the back of the auditorium. As she passed, she caught the eye of Daniel Foster, a quiet boy from her AP chemistry class. He gave her a small, sympathetic grimace, but quickly looked away when Victoria noticed his attention. The humiliation escalated at lunch. Sarah had qualified for the free lunch program, another form to fill out, another proof of poverty to submit, and she carefully balanced her tray while looking for somewhere to sit. The cafeteria operated on strict social geography. Victoria's court held the prime real estate by the windows, the athletes dominated the center tables, and the various academic clubs carved out their territories around the periphery. Sarah headed for an empty table in the corner, but she'd barely taken 3 steps when Victoria's perfectly manicured hand accidentally knocked into her tray. The contents, spaghetti with marinara sauce, chocolate milk, and a side salad, exploded across Sarah's uniform. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," Victoria gasped, her voice dripping with false concern. "But honestly, Sarah, you should watch where you're going. These aisles aren't meant for people carrying those awful free lunch trays. They're so overloaded compared to what the rest of us buy." The cafeteria erupted in nervous laughter. Someone, probably Madison or Jessica from Victoria's inner circle, had their phone out, recording everything. By the time Sarah made it to the bathroom, her hands shaking as she tried to clean the marinara sauce from her only blazer, the video had already been posted to Victoria's Instagram story with crying laughing emojis and the caption, "When the charity case tries to act normal, face with tears of joy, loudly crying faced." Sarah spent the rest of the day reeking of tomato sauce and sour milk, the stains on her uniform broadcasting her humiliation to everyone she passed. Teachers pretended not to notice. Her chemistry teacher, Mr. Harrison, quietly offered her his jacket, but she declined. Wearing a teacher's clothing would only add to her reputation as a charity case. The weeks that followed established a pattern of cruelty that Victoria elevated to an art form. There was the time Victoria announced to their AP literature class that Sarah's essay on poverty in Dickens was obviously written from too much personal experience. The morning Victoria planted her designer wallet in Sarah's backpack during PE and then loudly accused her of theft, only finding it in her own locker after the security guard had already searched Sarah in front of everyone. The study group incident where Victoria told everyone the location had changed, leaving Sarah waiting alone in an empty classroom while missing crucial review for their calculus midterm. But it was the Jeremy incident that nearly broke her. Jeremy Crawford was Preston's golden boy, captain of the lacrosse team, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, and blessed with a kind of casual good looks that made even teachers stammer. When he approached Sarah after school one October afternoon, she couldn't believe it. "Hey, Sarah, right?" He leaned against her locker with practiced ease. "I've been watching you in AP Lit. You're really smart." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Thanks, I like to read." "Listen, I know Victoria and her crew have been giving you a hard time. That's not cool. Want to grab dinner Friday? There's this great Italian place downtown. My treat." She should have known. Should have recognized the smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Should have noticed Madison badly hiding her phone around the corner. But loneliness and hope made her stupid. That Friday, Sarah spent an hour getting ready in the restaurant bathroom after her shift at the grocery store ended. She'd borrowed a dress from the apartment neighbor's daughter and even splurged on drugstore mascara. She waited at Bellissimo's for 2 hours, sending increasingly desperate texts to the number Jeremy had given her. The replies came all at once. In a group chat she'd been added to, dozens of photos of her waiting alone, checking her phone, her face gradually crumbling as realization set in. Victoria had live-streamed the whole thing, providing commentary like it was a nature documentary. And here we see the scholarship girl in her natural habitat, alone and delusional. The next week was unbearable. The screenshots were everywhere. Someone had made a meme of her hopeful face with the caption, "When you think you're pretty woman, but you're actually pretty desperate." Even teachers looked at her with pity now, which was somehow worse than indifference. It was Daniel Foster who finally showed her kindness, though he did it in the shadows where Victoria couldn't see. She started finding anonymous gift cards in her locker, $20 to the bookstore, $15 to the coffee shop. One day, after Victoria had accidentally spilled acrylic paint on Sarah's calculus textbook during art class, a clean used copy appeared in her backpack with a sticky note, "Stay strong." She knew it was Daniel when she caught him slipping a sandwich into her locker the day after Victoria had loudly announced that food stamps probably don't work at the good grocery stores, so poor Sarah has to shop at those gross discount places. "Why?" she asked him quietly after chemistry class, when everyone else had left. Daniel looked uncomfortable, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Because it's wrong what they're doing. And I'm too much of a coward to say it publicly. This is the least I can do." "You're not a coward," Sarah said, though they both knew she was lying. "You're surviving. We all are." The final humiliation came in May, just 2 weeks before graduation. Sarah had been accepted to Harvard Business School with a full scholarship, an achievement that should have been her triumph. When the acceptance letters were being celebrated at the senior breakfast, Victoria stood up, raising her orange juice in a mock toast. "Let's all congratulate Sarah on her Harvard acceptance. It's so inspiring how they have quotas to fill. I mean, someone has to take the spots they reserve for disadvantaged applicants. It's actually really noble of you, Sarah, to take advantage of a system designed for people who can't compete on merit alone." The room went silent. Even Victoria's followers looked uncomfortable. The dean cleared his throat but said nothing. Victoria's father had just donated a new wing to the library. Sarah stood, her hands steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "You're right, Victoria. I am taking advantage of every opportunity available to me. That's what people do when they can't rely on daddy's money to buy their way through life." She walked out before Victoria could respond, but she heard the laughter that followed, nervous, uncertain, but still there. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red but dry. She'd learned not to waste tears on people like Victoria Hastings. "One day," she whispered to her reflection, "one day, you'll understand what it feels like to be powerless. And I'll be there to see it." Harvard Business School was everything Preston Academy wasn't, a meritocracy where your last name mattered less than your last exam score. Sarah threw herself into this new world with the desperation of someone who'd been drowning finally reaching shore. Her dorm room was a closet compared to what her classmates had, but it was hers alone. No more sharing a pull-out couch, no more pretending not to hear her mother crying over bills in the kitchen. She worked 3 jobs to cover what her scholarship didn't, manning the library circulation desk from midnight to 4 a.m., tutoring undergraduates in economics, and pulling weekend shifts at a coffee shop in Harvard Square where entitled customers reminded her uncomfortably of Victoria. Her textbooks were always used, bought from graduating students or borrowed from the library. She ate 1 meal a day at the dining hall, stretching her meal plan by filling her backpack with fruit and bread for later. "Mitchell, you look like death," her study group partner, James, commented one evening as they prepared for their mergers and acquisitions final. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is a luxury I can't afford," Sarah muttered, her 4th espresso of the day making her hands shake slightly as she highlighted another case study. She graduated summa cum laude, her thesis on income inequality in corporate structures earning the Dean's Award. Goldman Sachs recruited her aggressively, and she accepted their offer not because she dreamed of investment banking, but because they offered the highest starting salary and a signing bonus that would finally allow her mother to quit one of her 3 jobs. Meanwhile, Victoria Hastings was documenting her leisurely path through college on Instagram. Sarah couldn't help but check occasionally, a form of digital self-harm that reminded her why she was working so hard. Victoria attended State University. Her grades hadn't been good enough for the Ivy League despite her father's connections. She majored in communications with a minor in marketing, her feed full of sorority formals, spring breaks in Cabo, and complaints about boring lectures. Daddy surprised me with a new BMW for making Dean's List. One post read, showing Victoria draped over a white convertible. Sarah looked up the requirements. A 3.1 GPA. At Harvard, that would have put you on academic probation. The Goldman years were a blur of fluorescent lights and Excel spreadsheets. Sarah lived in the office, keeping a change of clothes in her desk drawer and showering at the building's gym. She ate every meal at her desk, the cleaning staff knowing her by name since she was often the only one there when they arrived at 2 a.m. Her models were flawless, her presentations immaculate. She saved her clients millions, identified inefficiencies others missed, and slowly, methodically, built a reputation as someone who delivered results regardless of the personal cost. "Mitchell, you're making the rest of us look bad," her colleague Brad complained after she'd pulled her third all-nighter that week to finish a crucial merger analysis. "Don't you have a life outside this place?" "This is my life," Sarah responded, not looking up from her screens. "For now." The wedding announcement appeared on her Facebook feed during a particularly brutal week in her 4th year at Goldman. Victoria Hastings was marrying Marcus Wells, described in the announcement as a successful technology executive. The wedding photos were a study in excess, ice sculptures, a dozen bridesmaids in designer dresses, a reception at the most exclusive country club in Connecticut. Victoria's dress alone probably cost more than Sarah's mother had earned in a year. Sarah studied Marcus's face in the photos. Handsome in a conventional way, with a slightly soft look of someone who'd never had to fight for anything. His LinkedIn profile revealed he was a middle manager at Technova, a position that was respectable but hardly executive level. Victoria's caption gushed about her successful husband and their perfect life, carefully cropping out anything that might suggest Marcus was anything less than a titan of industry. It was during a company diversity seminar that Sarah had her epiphany. The presenter was discussing pay gaps, showing statistics about how women and minorities were consistently underpaid compared to their white male counterparts. The solution, the presenter suggested, was individual negotiation and lean-in strategies. Sarah wanted to laugh. Or scream. Individual negotiation meant nothing when companies deliberately hid salary data, when you had no idea if you were being paid fairly compared to your peers. That night, she started coding. EquiPay began as a side project, built during the precious few hours between leaving Goldman at midnight and returning at 6 a.m. It was a simple concept, a platform where employees could anonymously share their salary data, searchable by company, position, and experience level. No more information asymmetry. No more accepting less because you didn't know your worth. She recruited 2 developers from MIT, paying them with her savings and a promise of equity. They worked out of her studio apartment, surviving on ramen and determination. Within 6 months, they had 100,000 users. Within a year, they'd exposed pay gaps at dozens of Fortune 500 companies, forcing several high-profile corrections. Technova came calling with an acquisition offer she couldn't refuse, $500 million, with $50 million going directly to her as the majority shareholder. But Sarah negotiated for something more valuable than money, a senior VP position, a team of 200, and a $2 billion budget for strategic acquisitions. "You're 28 years old," the CEO, Robert Christensen, said during final negotiations. "Some board members think you're too young for this level of responsibility." "I was too young to be poor, too young to work 3 jobs through college, too young to generate $2 billion in revenue for Goldman," Sarah responded calmly. "Yet here we are." She got the position. Her first year at Technova was a masterclass in corporate transformation. She fired the deadweight, mostly older men who spent more time on golf courses than in the office. She promoted hungry talent, particularly women and minorities who'd been overlooked for years. Her division's profitability increased by 300%, earning her a feature in Forbes 40 Under 40 and a reputation as someone who got results by any means necessary. Victoria, meanwhile, filled her Instagram with carefully curated glimpses of her perfect life. Brunches at exclusive clubs, charity galas where she contributed nothing but her presence, photos of Marcus with captions about her successful executive husband. Sarah noticed Marcus was never actually in the office in these photos, always at home, looking increasingly tired around the eyes. A little research revealed the truth. Marcus Wells had been in the same position for 3 years, his last promotion a lateral move that added senior to his title but nothing to his responsibilities. His Glassdoor reviews, Sarah had ways of finding these things, described him as competent but unexceptional and lacks initiative. Victoria, it seemed, had married potential that never materialized. Sarah's assistant knocked on her door one Thursday afternoon, holding a stack of resumes. The applications for the Director of Market Analysis position, Ms. Brooks. Sarah had started using her married name professionally, a brief marriage to a fellow Harvard graduate that had ended amicably when they realized they were better as friends than spouses. She kept the name because it sounded more authoritative than Mitchell, and because it provided a layer of anonymity. Leave them. I'll review them tonight. She was halfway through her coffee when she saw it. Marcus Wells, current position, Senior Analyst, Technova. Emergency contact, Victoria Hastings Wells. Sarah set down her mug carefully, her mind racing. She pulled up Marcus's internal file, reading through 5 years of performance reviews. Consistent, but unremarkable.
Safe.
The kind of employee who never made waves, never took risks, never distinguished himself. Normally, he wouldn't have made it past the first round. But this wasn't normal. She spent the night researching both of them. Victoria's social media presence had become increasingly focused on complaining, subtle digs about Marcus working late, passive-aggressive posts about women who support their husbands' careers, memes about being a work widow. Marcus, meanwhile, had no social media presence at all, as if he'd been erased from the digital world. Sarah made her decision. Marcus would get an interview. He'd earned that much by surviving 5 years at Technova without any major failures. And if he proved himself competent, well, having Victoria's husband as her direct report would provide opportunities she couldn't yet fully imagine. The morning Marcus Wells was scheduled to interview, Sarah arrived at the office at 5 a.m., partly out of habit, but mostly out of anticipation. She deliberately scheduled him for 2 p.m., knowing the afternoon slot would give him all morning to stew in his anxiety. She wanted him slightly off balance, but not completely destroyed. She needed to evaluate his actual capabilities, not just his ability to handle stress. Her assistant had been instructed to list her as M. Brooks on all interview schedules, a small deception that would prevent any premature Google searches. Sarah had built her reputation carefully over the past years, and while her name appeared in trade publications and Forbes lists, she'd managed to keep her photo relatively scarce online. The few that existed showed a polished professional who bore little resemblance to the scared 17-year-old who'd fled Preston Academy's halls. She pulled up Marcus's application again, reading through his carefully crafted cover letter. "My wife has been instrumental in my career development," one paragraph read, "providing the support and stability that allows me to focus on professional growth." Sarah almost laughed. If only he knew how Victoria had really spent her days, spa appointments and wine-fueled lunches, where she complained about her husband's lack of ambition. The research Sarah had conducted went deep. She'd found Marcus's college transcripts, solid B+ average in business administration, his LinkedIn endorsements, all from colleagues at his level or below, never from supervisors, and even his GitHub profile, 2 abandoned repositories from failed attempts to learn coding. He was the epitome of mediocre, not bad enough to fire, not good enough to promote. At noon, Sarah watched from her office window as Marcus arrived on campus, a full 2 hours early. He sat in his car for 30 minutes, then walked to the building and disappeared into the ground floor bathroom. She knew he was in there adjusting his tie, practicing his handshake, maybe even giving himself a pep talk in the mirror. She'd done the same thing once, before her first real interview at Goldman. Victoria had clearly coached him. Sarah had found evidence of her involvement in the preparation, a charge for interview coaching services on their joint credit card statement. Yes, she had access to that information, the benefits of having the CFO as an ally, and a series of books ordered from Amazon. What female executives want to hear? Succeeding under women leaders, and, ironically, Lean In, a guide for male allies. At 1:45, Sarah made her way to the executive conference room, choosing the intimidating one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city. She arranged her materials precisely. Marcus's resume, annotated with her real thoughts in tiny handwriting, a legal pad for notes, and her phone face down but visible, a power move that suggested she had more important things to do. Marcus knocked at exactly 2 p.m. Punctual but not early, playing it safe, as his entire career suggested he would. "Come in," Sarah called, not looking up from her documents. Marcus entered, and Sarah watched his face in her peripheral vision as she continued to write. He was sweating already, despite the aggressive air conditioning. His suit was off the rack but carefully pressed, his shoes polished but worn at the heels. He'd clearly agonized over every detail of his appearance. She let him stand there for exactly 10 seconds, long enough to establish dominance, not so long as to be cruel, before looking up. "Mr. Wells, please sit." The moment their eyes met, she saw no recognition. Why would there be? She'd been nobody to him at Preston, just another face in the halls, and she'd transformed herself completely since then. Gone was the scared girl in the polyester blazer. In her place sat a woman in a $3,000 suit, her Harvard MBA prominently displayed on the wall behind her, her entire bearing radiating the kind of power that made grown men stutter. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Brooks," Marcus began, his voice slightly higher than it probably usually was. "I'm very excited about this opportunity." "Are you?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Tell me, Mr. Wells, what exactly excites you about this position? Because from your record, you seem to prefer stability over excitement." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct opening. Well, I believe I'm ready for new challenges. My current role has become, as you say, stable, and I think—" "You think?" Sarah interrupted. "Or your wife thinks. I noticed in your cover letter you mention her influence on your career quite prominently." A flush crept up Marcus's neck. "Victoria, my wife, she's very supportive. She encourages me to reach higher." "Interesting." Sarah made a note, letting him see her write something but not what. "And what does Victoria do professionally?" "She's involved in various charitable organizations," Marcus said carefully, the rehearsed nature of the response obvious. "She's very passionate about giving back to the community." Sarah wanted to ask which community, exactly, Victoria had ever given anything to besides grief, but she maintained her professional facade. "Let's discuss your technical capabilities. Walk me through your approach to the Morrison acquisition analysis." For the next 40 minutes, she grilled him on every project he'd touched in the last 3 years. Marcus performed adequately. He knew his material, could defend his decisions, and showed a decent understanding of market dynamics. But there was no spark, no innovation, no indication he'd ever had an original thought in his career. "Mr. Wells," Sarah said, setting down her pen, "you're competent. Your work is consistent. You meet deadlines and don't cause problems. Tell me why I should hire someone who's spent 5 years doing the bare minimum when I have candidates who've shown exceptional innovation in half that time." Marcus's face went pale. This wasn't in any interview prep book. I believe my consistency is an asset. Not everyone can be a superstar, but organizations need reliable. Stop. Sarah held up her hand. You're quoting directly from The Reliable Employee's Guide to Success. Page 47, if I recall correctly. I'm not interested in what books tell you to say. I'm interested in what Marcus Wells thinks. Do you even have opinions of your own, or does your wife form those for you too? It was cruel, perhaps, but she needed to see if there was anything beneath the carefully constructed mediocrity. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw a flash of something real. My wife doesn't form my opinions, he said, his voice lower, more controlled. Though she certainly shares hers freely. You want to know what I think? I think I've been playing it safe because I've been afraid of failing. I think I've let myself become comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think you already know all of this from my file, so the real question is why you're bothering to interview me at all. Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression she'd shown. Now that's interesting. Tell me more about being comfortable with discomfort. Marcus loosened his ties slightly. My wife comes from money. Old money. The kind where success is assumed, not earned. I grew up middle class, comfortable but not wealthy. When we met, I was intimidated by her world. Still am, honestly. So I learned to make myself small, non-threatening. I can't disappoint anyone if they don't expect anything from you. And yet you applied for this position, Sarah observed. That suggests some ambition. Or desperation, Marcus admitted. Victoria thinks I'm not living up to my potential. The irony is she's right, but not for the reasons she thinks. She sees potential for status, for the lifestyle she was raised to expect. I see potential for actual accomplishment, for building something meaningful. But I've been too scared to reach for it because reaching means risking failure, and failure means, well, in her world, failure means you're worthless. Sarah studied him carefully. This was unexpected, genuine self-awareness hidden beneath layers of practiced mediocrity. She thought of Daniel Foster, another person who'd chosen safety over courage, small kindnesses over grand gestures. Let me present you with a scenario, Sarah said. You discover that a senior colleague, someone with power over your career, has been systematically underpaying female employees on your team. You have proof, but exposing it would likely end your career at the company. What do? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The safe answer is to report it through proper channels and hope HR handles it appropriately. And the real answer? The real answer is, I don't know. I want to say I'd do the right thing, but I've spent 5 years watching discrimination happen and saying nothing. Not participating, but not stopping it either. I tell myself it's not my place, not my fight. But that's just cowardice dressed up as prudence. Sarah made another note. Tell me about a time you witnessed discrimination in the workplace. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. There was an incident last year. A female colleague, Jennifer, presented an idea in a meeting. It was ignored. 20 minutes later, Brad, another analyst, presented the same idea almost word for word. Everyone loved it. Jennifer looked at me because she knew I'd heard her original presentation. I said nothing. Why? Because Brad golfs with our director. Because Jennifer was leaving for maternity leave anyway. Because I told myself it wouldn't change anything. Because I'm a coward. The last words came out bitter, self-loathing. Sarah thought of all the times at Preston when Daniel had witnessed Victoria's cruelty and done nothing. At least he'd tried to help in his small way. Marcus hadn't even done that for Jennifer. If I hire you, Sarah said slowly, you'll be reporting directly to me. I have no tolerance for cowardice, no patience for mediocrity, and no interest in managing someone who needs their hand held. The position requires 60-hour weeks minimum, travel to Asia quarterly, and the ability to make decisions that affect thousands of employees. Your wife will see even less of you than she does now. Still interested? Marcus straightened. Yes. Why should I believe you're capable of change? You're 33 years old. You've been playing it safe your entire adult life. Because, Marcus said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time, I'm tired of being the person Victoria married. I want to be someone worth respecting, even if that means risking everything. Sarah closed his file. I'll be in touch within a week. Marcus stood, extending his hand. Thank you for your time, Ms. Brooks. May I ask, why did you give me this interview? My resume doesn't warrant it. Sarah shook his hand, her grip firm. Let's say I believe in giving people opportunities to surprise themselves. Whether you'll take that opportunity remains to be seen. After he left, Sarah sat alone in the conference room, staring at the city below. She could reject him now, let him sink back into mediocrity, let Victoria continue her delusion of having a successful husband. It would be the safe choice. But Sarah Mitchell had never made the safe choice. And Marcus Wells had just revealed something she hadn't expected. Potential. Not the kind Victoria saw, the potential for status and wealth. But the potential for growth, for courage, for becoming someone more than the sum of his fears. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. Put Marcus Wells through to the second round. And schedule it for next Friday at 7 a.m. Let's see how he handles pressure. The game was just beginning, and Victoria Hastings Wells had no idea she was playing. Marcus Wells got the call on a Tuesday afternoon while Victoria was at her weekly tennis lesson. When he saw the Technova number, his hands shook so badly he nearly dropped his phone. "Mr. Wells? This is Sarah Brooks. I'm pleased to offer you the position of Director of Market Analysis, reporting directly to me. The salary is $450,000 base, with a potential 40% performance bonus. You'll start Monday. I expect you in my office at 7 a.m. sharp." The number made him sit down. It was more than triple his current salary. Victoria would be ecstatic. Or would she? Lately, nothing seemed to make his wife happy. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks. I won't disappoint you." "No," Sarah said, her tone suggesting this was a statement of fact rather than encouragement. "You won't." When Victoria came home, flushed from tennis and 3 martinis at the club, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of champagne. "What's this?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Surprises from Marcus usually meant he'd done something requiring apology. "I got the promotion. Director of Market Analysis. The salary is—" Finally, Victoria interrupted, not letting him finish. "It's about time they recognized your value. Though director isn't exactly C-suite. When do you think you'll make VP?" Marcus felt the familiar deflation. Nothing was ever enough. "Victoria, this is a huge step. My new boss is supposed to be brilliant. If I can learn from her." Her. Victoria's eyebrow arched. "Let me guess, another diversity hire who'll be gone in 6 months? These companies are so focused on optics. Still, maybe you can use that. Female bosses love male allies. Did you mention me? Successful wives show stability." "I mentioned you," Marcus said quietly, remembering how Ms. Brooks had dissected that particular claim. Over dinner, Victoria peppered him with questions about his new boss. "What's her name? Where did she go to school? Is she married? Attractive? You know how these career women are, desperate for attention from any man who'll give it to them. Her name is M. Brooks. That's all I know. She keeps a low profile." Victoria pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. "M. Brooks, Technova VP nothing. That's weird. Everyone has a digital footprint. Unless—" She looked up, eyes narrowing. "She's probably hiding something. Affair with the CEO? Fake credentials? Mark my words, there's a scandal there." Marcus's first day in his new role was a revelation. Sarah Brooks ran her division like a military operation. Every meeting had an agenda, every decision required data, every minute was accounted for. She'd assigned him the West Coast territory, which was hemorrhaging money and had the worst client satisfaction scores in the company. "This is your proving ground," Sarah told him, spreading out the dismal quarterly reports. "Your predecessor blamed market conditions. I call that excuse-making. You have 6 months to show 40% improvement. Fail, and you're back to your old position, if it's still available. 40% might be impossible. Then you'll do the impossible. Or you'll fail. Either way, we'll both know what you're really made of." She stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Your first client call is in an hour. Don't embarrass me." Marcus had never worked harder in his life. Sarah demanded daily reports, questioned every decision, and pushed back on every assumption. But she also taught him, really taught him, in a way no manager ever had. She showed him how to read between the lines of financial statements, how to identify what clients really wanted versus what they said they wanted, how to negotiate from strength even when holding weak cards. The late nights started immediately. Marcus would come home at 10, 11 midnight, finding Victoria increasingly irritated. "She's taking advantage of you," Victoria complained after the 3rd week. "This is harassment. You should report her to HR." "She's not taking advantage of me. She's teaching me. Do you know what I learned today? How to structure a deal that saves the client money while increasing our margins. It's brilliant." "I don't care about your little work stories," Victoria snapped. "I care that you missed the Hendersons' dinner party. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up alone? Everyone asking where my successful husband was." The funny thing was, Marcus was becoming successful. Really successful. His first major win came 6 weeks in, landing a client that had been considering jumping to a competitor. Sarah had coached him through the negotiation, teaching him to identify the decision-maker's real concerns, job security, versus their stated concerns, price. Excellent work, Sarah said, and Marcus felt prouder than he had at his wedding. You're learning. Victoria's resentment grew with each passing week. She started making snide comments about Asian tiger bosses and women who compensate for their lack of femininity with aggression. She'd text him constantly during work hours, demanding to know when he'd be home, accusing him of choosing work over family. We don't even have kids, Marcus pointed out during one particularly bitter fight. Whose fault is that? You're never here to make them. The company Christmas party was scheduled for December 15th, and Victoria had been preparing for weeks. This would be her chance to see the mysterious M. Brooks, to stake her territory, to remind everyone that Marcus belonged to her. I bought a new dress, she announced, modeling a $3,000 piece of designer silk. I want to make sure your boss knows you have a sophisticated wife. These career women always respect women who choose family over ambition. Marcus wanted to point out that Victoria had never worked a day in her life, that choosing family implied there had been another option, but he'd learned to pick his battles. The night of the party, Sarah was everywhere and nowhere. Marcus caught glimpses of her, commanding the room during the CEO's toast, gracefully managing conversations with board members, somehow making every person she spoke with feel like the most important in the room. But every time he tried to introduce Victoria, Sarah had just moved on to another group. Is she avoiding us? Victoria hissed after their third failed attempt. This is deliberate. She's intimidated by wives. Classic insecure career woman behavior. Marcus watched his boss work the room with a combination of awe and confusion. Sarah Brooks was many things. Demanding, brilliant, sometimes terrifying, but insecure wasn't one of them. The breaking point came in February. Marcus had just closed a $50 million acquisition, his largest deal yet. Sarah had put him in charge of the entire negotiation, observing but not interfering. When they won, she'd actually smiled, a rare occurrence that made him feel like he'd conquered Everest. He came home at 2 a.m., exhausted but exhilarated, to find Victoria waiting in the living room with printed screenshots spread across the coffee table. Your boss, she said coldly, is quite the success story. Forbes 40 under 40. Harvard MBA. Sold her startup for $500 million. Funny how you never mentioned any of that. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You're too busy worshipping her to actually research who she is. Did you know she goes by her married name?
Brooks.
She's married, Marcus. Yet she keeps you at the office until all hours. It's inappropriate. Marcus looked at the screenshots, seeing his boss's accomplishments laid out in black and white. It was intimidating and inspiring in equal measure. She's divorced, actually. She mentioned it once. Even better. A divorced woman in power, working my husband like a dog. I've been talking to the other wives at the club. This is classic. She's either sleeping with you or planning to. That's ridiculous and insulting. To both of us. Victoria stood, her face flushed with wine and anger. What's insulting is you choosing her over me. Every single day, you choose her. I'm choosing my career, my future, our future. No, Victoria said quietly. You're choosing to become someone I don't recognize. The Marcus I married was sweet, accommodating, knew his place. This Marcus, the one she's creating, I don't like him very much. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Victoria had spent years berating him for his lack of ambition, and now that he'd found it, she hated him for it. The next morning, Sarah called him into her office. You look tired. Rough night. She studied him for a moment. Your wife isn't handling your success well. It wasn't a question. Marcus wondered how much she knew, how much she'd overheard or intuited. She's adjusting, he said diplomatically. Is she? Sarah pulled out a folder. There's a senior director position opening in June. Based on your performance, you're a strong candidate. But it requires relocating to Singapore for 2 years. Still interested? Marcus thought of Victoria, who complained when they had to drive 2 hours to visit his parents. I'll need to discuss.
No sarà interrupted.
I'm asking you, not your wife.
You.
Are you interested? For the first time in his marriage, Marcus answered without considering Victoria first. Yes. Sarah nodded. Good. Keep performing at this level, and it's yours. Oh, and Marcus? The Preston Academy reunion is coming up in May. I'll be attending. You should bring Victoria. I think it's time we all officially met. Something in her tone made Marcus uneasy, but he couldn't identify what. You went to Preston? Different year, Sarah said vaguely. But I have connections there. It should be an interesting evening. Victoria Hastings-Wells stood in her walk-in closet, surveying her arsenal. The Preston Academy 15-year reunion required the perfect outfit, something that screamed success without trying too hard, wealth without ostentation, happiness without desperation. She finally settled on a $4,000 Saint Laurent dress that hugged in all the right places, paired with the diamond earrings Marcus had bought her after his first bonus from his new position. How do I look? She asked Marcus, who was adjusting his tie in the mirror. Beautiful, he said automatically, though his mind was elsewhere. Sarah had been acting strange all week, a contained energy that reminded him of a cat before it pounced. She'd confirmed she would attend the reunion, mentioning she had old acquaintances to revisit. You're not even looking, Victoria accused. This is important, Marcus. These are my people. Our people. I need them to see how well we're doing. The irony that Marcus was the one actually doing well seemed lost on her. They arrived at the Preston Academy Grand Ballroom fashionably late, Victoria's insisted timing to ensure maximum impact. The room was awash in cocktail dresses and expensive suits, the air thick with perfume and decades-old rivalries renewed. Victoria. Madison Crawford rushed over, her face slightly too tight from recent Botox. You look amazing. And Marcus, I hear congratulations are in order. Victoria's been telling everyone about your promotion. Marcus noticed how Victoria had carefully curated the story. His title had been inflated to senior director. His boss had become the CEO's right hand, and somehow Victoria's support had become central to his success. As they circulated, Marcus watched his wife work the room. She had a gift for subtle devastation, commenting on weight gain while pretending to compliment outfit choices, asking about divorces with feigned concern, mentioning her husband's success at every opportunity. Have you seen Sarah Mitchell? Someone asked. I heard she's some big shot now. Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Sarah Mitchell? The scholarship girl? Please. She probably married well and claimed credit for her husband's success. These charity cases always do. Marcus was about to respond when a hush fell over the nearby crowd. He turned to see what had caused it. Sarah Brooks walked in, and the room seemed to reorganize itself around her. She wore a simple black sheath dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Several people approached her immediately. The ones who'd done their research, who knew she was Technova's youngest SVP, who'd seen the Forbes articles. Who is that? Victoria asked, irritation creeping into her voice at being upstaged. Marcus's blood went cold. That's my boss. That's Sarah Brooks. Victoria's face went through several expressions, confusion, disbelief, then determination. Well, let's go introduce ourselves properly. I'm dying to meet the woman who's been monopolizing my husband. They approached just as Sarah was finishing a conversation with the headmaster. She turned, her eyes meeting Victoria's, and Marcus saw something he'd never seen in his boss's face before. Pure, undiluted anticipation. Victoria Hastings, Sarah said warmly, extending her hand. It's been so long. Victoria froze, her hand halfway to Sarah's.
I'm sorry. Dove?
Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? Sarah Brooks now, Sarah confirmed, her smile sharp as a blade. Though I was Sarah Mitchell when you knew me. The scholarship girl, I believe you called me? Among other things. The color drained from Victoria's face so quickly Marcus worried she might faint. Around them, he could feel the crowd pressing closer, sensing drama. You look so different, Victoria stammered. Success will do that, Sarah replied. As will proper nutrition. I can afford to eat more than one meal a day now. No more waiting for anonymous gift cards to buy lunch. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Marcus looked between them, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. You two went to school together? He asked, though the answer was obvious. Oh yes, Sarah said, her eyes never leaving Victoria's face. Victoria was quite memorable. She had such interesting hobbies. There was that Instagram account. What was it called? Scholarship Tracker? So creative, documenting every time I wore the same outfit twice. And that prank with Jeremy Crawford, having him ask me out and stand me up while you live-streamed my humiliation? Innovative bullying, really. You were always ahead of your time. People were openly staring now, phones appearing in hands. Victoria seemed to shrink with each word. We were children, Victoria whispered. It was just teenage nonsense. Was it? Sarah tilted her head. The wallet you planted in my bag wasn't nonsense when security searched me. The rumors about my mother writing my Harvard essays weren't nonsense when you reported them to the guidance counselor. The daily humiliations, the casual cruelty, the systematic destruction of a 17-year-old girl's dignity, none of that was nonsense. It was calculated, deliberate, and very, very effective. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, you're my boss. Sarah turned to him, and for a moment, her expression softened. Yes, Marcus. I'm your boss. The scholarship charity case is your boss. The girl your wife tormented for sport now signs your paychecks. Life has a sense of humor, doesn't it? The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was buzzing with whispers and poorly concealed smartphone recordings. Victoria grabbed Marcus's arm. We're leaving. Actually, Sarah said conversationally, you might want to stay. I'm about to give a speech about the new scholarship fund I'm establishing. $10 million for full rides to Preston, specifically for students from low-income families. I'm calling it the Victoria Hastings Memorial Fund for Redemption. Oh, don't look so shocked. You're not dead. But your reputation at Preston is about to be. You can't, Victoria started. Can I? I've already spoken to the headmaster. We're including a full history of the fund's naming, including your greatest hits from our school days. The Instagram account, the wallet incident, the Jeremy prank. All of it. Consider it an educational tool about the lasting impacts of bullying. Victoria turned to Marcus, tears streaming down her face. Do something. Marcus looked at his wife, then at his boss, then back at his wife. What exactly would you like me to do? Defend you? Tell her those things didn't happen. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. That's why I'm not going to lie for you. He turned to Sarah. I had no idea about any of this. Sarah studied him for a long moment. I know. That's why you still have a job. The rest of the evening was a blur of humiliation for Victoria. Person after person approached Sarah with congratulations, while giving Victoria a wide berth. Old classmates suddenly remembered witnessing Victoria's cruelty, distancing themselves from someone who'd once been their queen. Did you plan this? Marcus asked Sarah quietly during a moment alone. Hiring me, I mean. Was it all revenge? Sarah considered the question. Initially, maybe. But you earned your position, Marcus. You're good at what you do, when you're not being held back. The fact that your success highlights Victoria's uselessness is just a bonus. That's cruel. Is it? Crueler than what she did to me? Crueler than what she's done to you, making you small so she could feel big. Sarah picked up a champagne glass. I'm not cruel, Marcus. I'm successful. And success, as your wife is learning, is the best revenge. The drive home from the reunion was silent until Victoria exploded in the driveway. You just stood there. You let her humiliate me. The way you humiliated her for years? Marcus followed her into the house, something shifting fundamentally in his chest. Jesus, Victoria, you planted evidence to frame her for theft. That was 15 years ago. I was a teenager. You were 18, an adult. And you tortured someone for being poor. Marcus loosened his tie, exhaustion hitting him. Do you have any idea how that sounds? How sick it is? Victoria whirled on him. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it was like having this girl show up at our school, taking resources meant for us, acting like she belonged. She did belong. She earned her place, which is more than you ever did. The slap came so fast Marcus didn't see it coming. His cheeks stung as Victoria stood there, chest heaving. How dare you? I made you. Before me, you were nothing. A nobody from a nothing family with nothing prospects. I elevated you. Marcus touched his cheek, tasting copper where his teeth had cut the inside of his mouth.
No.
You diminished me. Every day, in 1,000 small ways. You made me less than I was. Just like you tried to do to her. His phone buzzed. An email from Technova's HR department, marked urgent. He opened it, his stomach dropping. What?
Victoria demanded.
There's been a complaint filed. Someone sent HR screenshots of text messages you sent about Sarah. Recent ones. He scrolled through, his face paling. Victoria, these are racist. Incredibly racist. And they have your name on them. Victoria snatched the phone. There they were, the texts she'd sent to her Preston friends just last week, complaining about Marcus's Asian bitch boss and making comments about diversity hires and tiger mothers. Someone had compiled them and sent them to Technova's ethics board. This is illegal. Private messages. Sent to people who don't like you anymore, Marcus finished. People who just watched you get destroyed at that reunion. God, Victoria, do you not understand? You made enemies. For fun. And now they're returning the favor. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work to find a summons to HR. The meeting was brief and brutal. While he hadn't sent the messages, his wife's racist comments about a senior executive created a hostile work environment. He was given a choice: take a transfer to the London office immediately or resign. London. Victoria shrieked when he told her. I'm not moving to London. Then I go alone. The divorce papers were drawn up within a week. Victoria's father's lawyers descended like vultures, but there was a problem. The prenup she'd insisted on to protect her wealth now worked against her. She'd never worked, never contributed financially. Marcus's new salary made him the breadwinner. She would get alimony, but not much and not for long. This is her doing. Victoria raged to anyone who would listen. That bitch orchestrated all of this. But Sarah was nowhere near the divorce proceedings. She was in Singapore, finalizing a $1 billion acquisition, when she received the news that Marcus had filed for divorce. She felt nothing. Or rather, she felt the same satisfaction she got from a particularly elegant solution to a complex problem. The real devastation came from an unexpected source. The Presbyterian Ladies' Charity Board, where Victoria's mother had secured her a position, received an anonymous package. It contained screenshots of the old scholarship tracker, Instagram, recordings from the reunion, and a detailed account of Victoria's bullying. The board, concerned about their reputation, quietly suggested Victoria take a break from her duties. Her father was less subtle. You've embarrassed this family, he told her coldly. Your mother is mortified. Her friends' children are sending her videos of you being called out for teenage cruelty. The club has asked us to reconsider our membership. Daddy, please. You're 33 years old, getting divorced, with no career, no prospects, and now no reputation. Your mother and I will provide you with a modest allowance, but the trust fund remains frozen until you can prove you've grown up. Victoria found herself in a one-bedroom apartment in Stamford, a far cry from the Westchester mansion she'd shared with Marcus. She applied for jobs but had no references, no experience, no skills beyond planning parties and spending money. Her Preston friends gradually stopped returning her calls. The reunion video had gone viral in their social circles, making her radioactive. Marcus thrived in London. Away from Victoria's shadow, he discovered he was actually quite good at his job. Sarah had written him a glowing recommendation, and he was promoted within 6 months. He sent her a thank you email, which she answered briefly but warmly. He started dating a colleague, a brilliant woman named Emma who laughed at his jokes and encouraged his ambitions. When he told her about Victoria, about the manipulation and the diminishment, Emma held his hand and said, "Thank God you got out." Victoria's social media, once a carefully curated display of perfection, went dark. The last post was a photo from the reunion, her in that expensive dress, captioned, "Perfect night with my successful husband." The comments below told a different story. Sarah never mentioned Victoria again. She didn't need to. The scholarship fund was established, renamed the Excellence Through Adversity Fund, after the board deemed the original name unnecessarily provocative. But everyone knew the story. It became Preston legend, the charity case who became a tech executive, the mean girl who fell from grace. At the first scholarship ceremony, Sarah spoke to a room full of students, many from backgrounds like hers. "You'll face people who think you don't belong," she said. "People who will try to make you small, to convince you that your poverty is a character flaw, that their cruelty is your fault. Don't believe them. Work harder. Rise higher. And when you succeed, because you will succeed, remember that living well isn't the best revenge. Living better is." In the audience, a 17-year-old girl clutching her acceptance letter nodded, tears in her eyes. She'd been sleeping in her car with her mother, studying by streetlight. Sarah saw herself in those determined eyes and smiled. Victoria, watching the live stream from her apartment, shut her laptop and poured another glass of wine. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. She had nowhere else to be. The last twist came 6 months later. Daniel Foster, the quiet boy from Preston who'd slipped Sarah those gift cards, reached out. He'd built a successful edtech company and needed an investor. Sarah not only invested but joined the board, and at their first meeting, he apologized. "For what?" Sarah asked. "For being a coward. For not standing up to her. For letting you face that alone." Sarah looked at him, successful now, confident, nothing like the scared boy who'd hidden his kindness, and said, "You did what you could. That's more than most." They became business partners, then friends. Daniel told her about running into Victoria at a grocery store. She was working as a cashier, her father having finally cut off her allowance. She'd pretended not to recognize him. "Did you feel sorry for her?" Sarah asked. "No," Daniel admitted. "I thought about all the times she made you cry, and I felt justice. Is that wrong?" Sarah looked out her office window at the city below, at the empire she'd built from spite and brilliance in equal measure.
No.
It's not wrong. It's just what happens when you build your throne on others' bones. Eventually, they climb out of the ground. Marcus sent her a final email from London. "Thank you for showing me who she really was. And who I could be." Sarah didn't respond, but she saved it. Proof that revenge didn't have to destroy you. Sometimes, it could free everyone, even the collateral damage. Victoria Hastings Wells née Hastings, former Queen of Preston Academy, present Queen of Nothing, never recovered. She lived the rest of her life in that small apartment, working retail jobs, watching her former victims surpass her in every measurable way. The girl she'd called a charity case had a net worth in the hundreds of millions. The husband she diminished was thriving abroad with a woman who actually loved him. And late at night, when the wine couldn't quiet the thoughts, Victoria wondered if this was what Sarah had felt all those years ago, small, worthless, forgotten. The answer, had she asked, would have been no. Sarah Mitchell had felt rage. And rage, properly channeled, could move mountains. Or destroy them. Have you ever held back from defending someone because it felt safer to stay silent? And do you still think about what might have changed if you'd spoken up? If this story of revenge and redemption resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of underdogs who turn their pain into power.